I have a question for Poyry. How have your traditional converter customers reacted to your march downstream of them into their customers? How have you adapted your selling function to cope with their reaction?
Clearly, there's been skepticism, and especially internally. Our sales department has been very, cautious about it. We do it very transparent manner. We're not trying to become a converter. It is more how do we add value together. So basically today we do these brand owner visits or retailer visits together with some of our converters. Obviously the universe of converters, there are big ones and small ones. And if you look Stora Enso, so we already have some global deals done directly with the brand owners, where then the brand owner decides who are the converters. So we already have a mixture of different setups. I think the key here is to do it very transparent manner, and we all aim to add value in that value chain.
Thank you.
As a follow-up question to that, Poyry, what really have changed in Stora Enso in order to be able to adopt the new knowledge that you have? How are you changing the company and the way you're selling, or what products you effectively are creating going forward?
So we have a broad portfolio in consumer board, and once I joined, we created two business units. We have the liquid board unit, which is where I would call the Chinese walls. We grow together with the customers or the converters, and we need to keep everything we do with this particular customer that's within the Chinese walls. So we have isolated teams that information is not to fly. But when we come to the general packaging area, which we call the carton board area, we talk about pharma, cosmetics, we talk about liquor, alcohol, we talk about food packaging. There you see the universe of different converters, different role with the brand owners. So we've been really forced to create a team who works only with the brand owners. You need special skills, understanding the consumer better, and then we have a bit different approach in the converter area. We've been also very clear we have to focus on which products grades we focus on, where we believe we have more to give. So that has requested that I launched a product management. We didn't have a product management teams. So basically we have a product management organization now in place, owning the product, understanding who this product is most suitable for, what is the market, who are the potential brand owners, who are the converters working in this area. So it's a completely new generation of Stora Enso teams, partially internally, internal recruitments, but we also been looking outside, so we've been recruiting outside.
Must be quite a shock, yeah. More questions, please. Yeah, there's a question over there.
Yeah, how's the competitive position of paper-based packaging now in the low oil gas price environment, and also where aluminium prices are bottom low? Do you see that as a threat to the paper-based packaging developments?
That's to me?
Yeah.
So if we roughly look, if you look like, let's take a plate where meat industry is packing the meat. It's basically plastic, and we can do it out of board. The price difference is roughly 15% as we speak. Now the big question, and I think what you also raised, is how the legislation is coming into the picture, and how the consumers' awareness of the renewability will impact how they choose the packaging. The mineral oil discussion is popping up in different countries when we talk about recycled carton board, and the food safety, the contamination and the traceability is a big question. And we clearly see that the food safety is becoming one of those key parameters. So plastic, obviously, that's safe, but then it's more the sustainability dimension of the topic. How does the brand owner want to differentiate themselves?
I'd like to address the same question to you, Uti. I mean, with the low cost of oil today and therefore the plastic becoming more competitive, how do you see that? Does that actually increase the substitution over towards plastic?
Well, first of all, the packing line and investments have a pretty long life cycle, so they don't change, the brand owners don't change the packing line overnight. I mean, obviously the lifetime is at least 10, 15 years. And like Jari said, I mean, the packaging is so essential part of the brand positioning and value that and we have so diverse field of packaging. Obviously, we have the high quality brands where packaging is so, the cost of packaging is actually quite irrelevant. It's part of the brand value, it's part of the positioning in the market. Obviously, the low, let's say the lower quality, more competed parts of products, everyday food, frozen food, some of the like chips and fries and things like that, where the paying capability is lower. There, of course, the threat is higher. And then we have to also bear in mind the geographical differences. A lot of the consumers in the Asian markets cannot afford, the ones who are just starting to buy from the market. They go for the low options. But on the other hand, we have the growing middle class in India and China looking for high quality branded products being in nice packages. And those brand owners who are serving those markets, cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, high quality spirits, for example, they don't change like that because that's such an essential part of the brand value.
If I continue Otis' point, one thing that we did with one particular retailer, the retailer has clearly stated to their consumers that sustainability, we will reduce plastic. And they changed a number of assortment where they have plastic packaging, and they said we want to go for renewable solutions. The thing with the retailers is that they don't have the assets. They go for different brands. Can you do this for me? If you can't, they can. So they change the range of those products in 1 month's time, and they don't need to discuss about what is the life cycle of my assets. The current supplier lost that business and a new supplier got a business. But that's also where we need to think how the retailers are becoming like brands, and they clearly start seeing they role in a different manner and taking the responsibility of the communication, how they want to position themselves.
And getting more and more power, basically.
Absolutely.
Yes, and that's also related to the private label growth.
Yeah.
And they are taking more active role in the private label segment.
Yeah. And private label is not only cheap, there is a high premium private labels as well. If you look in this country, how Tesco Finest and how they're playing with the different grades or premiumization in the private label industry. They're becoming brands.
Yeah. And more. We have a question here, please. If you can state who you are also, please. Sure.
Hi, I'm Ali Dadmoveni from Almera Center. A question for Solidonia. We've seen great returns, obviously 50, 70% for private equity investors in the space. I suppose the million-dollar question is how much of it is just being caught on the rising tide of rising exit multiples, and how much of it is something that's, that private equity can add value to. And we've seen a lot of activity. So if you expect multiples to start stabilizing, where do you think the opportunities are, and what kind of activity can private equity undertake to sort of exit at similar returns?
Yeah. I think the three examples that I showed, they were not easy. All three of them, there was some work that had to be done, a lot of restructuring, a lot of carving out assets. So those examples were not easy. So I think from the financial sponsor community, you have to come in and actually get your hands dirty a lot of times in packaging. Where are the opportunities? I think mostly in carve-outs from big groups. A lot of the big groups have orphan assets in their portfolio, assets in packaging that they do not actually focus on, and I think those could be quite interesting investing opportunities.
If I can ask a follow-up question to you, Sally, how much do you feel that this is for the PE houses? Is this an opportunity that where financial engineering effectively can do the trick? Or is it, as you say, get your hands dirty and more operationally focused?
No, I think most of the success stories have been people actually being quite cost conscious, focusing on the bottom line, and a bit less of financial engineering. Also the multiples you're talking about here, a lot of times you enter at 6, going to 8, 9. Really, to create value here, you really have to improve the bottom line. I think there's some great examples. Poyry, for example, is doing a good job at improving the profitability of that business as well.
Other questions? Maybe I can raise another topic. Sorry. Yes. Microphone is coming in.
Thank you. Lisa Bovilin, Impacts Asset Management. One question related to food packaging that I had was, and it was mentioned, the sort of coatings and barriers, and we spoke about safety at length. But one of the issues we see as investors is that there are fears about chemicals and, for example, EDCs, endocrine disruptors, BPAs, etc., sort of transferring into the food. And in the US, for example, consumers do seem to pay premiums for packaging without BPA, for example. Is this a strength for board?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Well, like I said, we're the MFC, where we're aiming, cellulose is a clean product. So we see clearly the glue type of picture I had in the presentation. It's a very pure product. And if that can, and we strongly believe that can act as a barrier, and it has a food safety dimension, basically there is no chemicals. So that's where we're investing, why we say our key focus is in the biobarriers, but using basically the MFC, or there is also the nanofiber cellulose. But cellulose can also be the glue type of product, which is the hemicellulose of the sugars of the cellulose. Can be used also in food, keeping the moisture of the food, and that's non-additive. That's a pure product.
Could I then ask, in France, for example, that has now put in place strong rules on BPA not being part of the sort of food utensils, etc., and packaging, the industry is saying there are no substitutes. Is this just lobbying, or is that your product is not known, or that it's expensive? Well,
we have started with MFC 2002, and now first we are on an industrial scale. And it's still used as a source reduction. Basically, it's between the board, reducing the amount of board. Now, the challenge with MFC is we need to get the food legislators to understand that it's a allowed tool. So we still have a year or two to go that the legislation is approving this, and there is enough field studies about the safety and basically also the performance of this barrier. When it comes, like coffee is one of those most difficult areas. It's a lot of, when we drink coffee, there is a lot of fat. It's hot. So the functionality of hot and fat is giving an extra hard challenge for the coffee cups, for example. And that we need to crack. But we believe we were very close.
Other questions? If not, I'd like to bring up another subject. Sorry, there was a question over there. Yes.
Sele, you showed the share price value development. The wood fiber-based packaging has a really good story to tell. Consumers like it. The same consumers are shareholders. What is the main reason, or what are the main reasons why you think the share value, or other panelists think the share value of wood fiber-based packaging has been slower, disappointing, I would almost say, than with the plastics?
No, I think clearly the growth expectations for paperboard, in particular container board and carton board, is not the same, do not show the same level of growth expectations as for flexible plastics and for rigids. and therefore the market should actually also value them at actually lower multiples as well. Also, the margins that some of the flexible plastic packaging companies are actually achieving are much higher. But more importantly, a lot of the flexible packaging companies that we have in our subgroup that you had there have been very aggressively expanding into emerging markets. Huhtamäki has expanded a lot into India, into Southeast Asia. Amcor is almost, to an extent, also quite a Australian-based company. So also the growth of the flexible plastic packaging companies in that particular set really is also driven by they being extremely aggressive in emerging markets, whilst the paperboard and containerboard companies that we have in Europe really are not there yet. A lot of them are really only focused in Europe and to a large extent in North America, and are not really growing don't have the same sort of emerging market growth characteristics that the flexible and rigid plastic packaging companies have.
There I would only say Huhtamäki has also board. Board is a big part of their business, and how they're growing in the cup stock is enormous. They're number one globally.
Other questions? Jarkko?
Yeah, just the mic is next. So perhaps one question to Jari, and then also would like to hear Otis comment to this one. So you were talking about the innovation. I think we all can easily agree to MFC and barriers, but what about this intelligent packaging? That is nothing new. It has been already discussed for more than a decade, and we have the Walmart trying with the RFID and sort of managing all the logistics and getting the benefits. We have different ideas about the sensors and putting those, especially in the food side, and understanding what's happening. Also then this consumer interaction with the different tags, etc. So why do you believe that would now really happen and take off while it has not done it for the past 10 years?
First of all, as you know, my background is with the food, and food has been the slow mover in terms of e-commerce. And food is a gigantic category as such. Now, as you look, the retailers moving into the e-commerce and the launch of loyalty cards, the information they have available, there is a clear interest, and we see clearly that the retailers are more interested about the intelligent packaging than the brand owners, which to me is saying, and it's kind of a wake-up call for myself as well, when coming from the branded side and seeing how narrowly we've been looking. We've been really not having antennas out. The loyalty cards, how the different apps now, for example, let's take London, not to name the retailer, but I've been following how consumer shops in once you go to the store, and how you pick products, like for example in frozen. In the UK, frozen is not nearly non-existing anymore in the physical retailing. And we looked frozen pizza. Why is it only fresh when you buy in store, but when you buy online, it's 60% frozen? So that's already interesting, and then you come to the point that the consumer is not having a dialogue with the salesperson. The packaging is becoming more the communication tool. And this is where I think the wake-up call, and I clearly see that the retailers are forcing everybody to think differently. I think we've seen also many mistakes in the e-commerce. If you have just a list, we need to learn how to work more, to make the e-commerce more consumer-friendly, to understand how our brain works. That's why I'm saying category management is rubbish. That's not consumer-driven. This is supply-driven. And those e-commerce players who play with category management type of, you dry food and fresh food and it's about supply chain. That doesn't exist in e-commerce. And there you start having that, the loyalty card, the product, and the information. Where's the cloud? Who has the know-how? That's becoming the race of the future.
And I would like to add that on top of the e-commerce, of course, food safety is an important driver for this type of intelligent smart packaging, longer storage times, goods do travel longer times, longer periods. If you go to an average supermarket in the UK, or not to talk about Scandinavia, I would say a very big part of the products that are in the store are coming from very far distances. And for those kind of long travel distances, you need to have a good understanding the conditions and where the packages and the food have been. So I think those drivers are now pushing this RFID and all this intelligence packaging more to the markets.
And I think we're doing our biggest investment ever now in Asia, building a new board machine in south of China and positioning our position in the Asia Pacific as a newcomer to that region. We clearly see that the digitalized information, the consumers behave differently. They're looking for information, food safety, with all these scandals that has been happening in China. They do care, and they are more early adopters than we here in Europe. We are still debating about our cultural differences in Europe. We are still debating how every country is so different from one another. In Asia, you don't hear the same debates. It is more about it's the individualism. I want control and I decide how I choose. Is it right or wrong? We just have to respect the consumer's choices.
True. Question over there.
If consumer behaviors are moving more towards a cradle-to-cradle approach and there's more focus on sustainability, I would have thought that would have a negative impact on the use of plastics and plastic materials in packaging solutions. But looking at your data, it seems that the plastics market for packaging is indeed growing faster than the alternative. What is the reason for that? Or is the implications or limitations of that cradle-to-cradle sustainability approach limited?
What we see in our studies is clearly why I raised you need to create the demographics of the consumers. I represent those old guys who didn't really understand, or I haven't been actively choosing products and services from the value of sustainability. When we look at the kids born after 1990, they are behaving differently. When you look their behavior on e-commerce, when you look their behavior of information, what they're looking for, what are the hits we get online, what are the questions, and when we now did a massive consumer survey, we clearly see that their awareness of sustainability is in a different level that we've seen in many other surveys before. And then when we look the difference between kids born, or the people born 70s and people born 90s, after 90s, there is a huge change. So it's about understanding where the next generation coming into the power, how that will impact the choices. And I think that's where we need to be much better equipped in terms of understanding how these megatrends, like I said, they're nothing new. There is nothing new basically. But you start seeing political movements also, why European Commission is getting more nervous, why there is a new legislations coming in, how the political now let's look at the Paris conference in a couple of weeks of time. The climate change is coming on the table in a different manner and with different force. China, they didn't even want to discuss about the pollution. Look what has happened in China just in 2 years' time. So I'm just saying we need to be aware that this might be much changing our way of consuming and choosing services that we really understand at the moment.
Uti, could you maybe address also for this question, the question about recycling plastics, because a lot of plastics can be recycled, and therefore the trade-off here with cost is quite important.
Yes, that's quite right, and obviously it depends. I mean, first of all, there's recycling systems in different countries. The whole waste collection in different countries is so different, and so is the cost structures. And so, but I couldn't agree more with Jari on that these environmental issues are just now coming also to the heart, I would say, on the serious discussions. And the recycling, circular economy and that kind of things are becoming a necessity, not just, greenwashing.
Yeah. But I think the important thing is some plastics, like PET, for instance, is quite recyclable. And therefore, when Brussels is talking about the new legislation, it actually benefits plastics to a certain extent, which is a concern for some of the producers in the industry.
Well, I was in the Commission last week and in the European Parliament discussing about that with the Commissioner, Plastic is recyclable, but it's still fossil-based.
Yes.
So there is coming also this, how does the plastic disappear from the globe? Where is the end use of the plastic? Because it doesn't disappear. So there are other dimensions coming into the legislators' table. How do we see that? Then we see retailers do make money in certain countries with recycling. And for example, board, they don't make any money. So this is also the awareness of the political audience now, that we need to understand this whole value chain better and take that more seriously. It's to be seen. As we know, these political changes are not fast, but at least I'm impressed with the circular economy, how fast this is coming now to the parliament. It is going to be presented mid-December this year. And I'm sure Paris will see what is the outcome of Paris meeting now, how that will impact. But also would like to highlight, more and more brand owners are coming out with the clear statements. By 2020, we only have renewable materials, or, you know, the brands are also taking stand, and by that time we will change our behavior in different areas.
True. I think there's a follow-up.
Well, sorry, just as a small follow-up question, do you see a very significant difference in that aspect, for example, on how that is in Europe, or how it, for example, is in the US or in Asia, on the kind of sustainability element?
Sure.
And just very small, going forward, do you think, so as I understand now, that part of the market that influences the decision of using a sustainability type of product is fairly small, because you're talking about people born in the 90s and going forward? That's, I think, from a consumer group, still a relatively small group that impacts the economics of these industries. But how long going forward do you think that impact will become very material? So as an industry, you have to think about how the sustainability angle has a significant impact on your business.
For us, we are a global player, so only legislation relating to Europe is not really helping us. We need to understand the global picture of it. Like you saw to this morning's presentation, Asia Pacific, it's a huge market. And there, the key challenge is, especially in China, pollution is a fact. Consumers are more aware. And that's interesting how that legislation will start changing. Just looking in my area, board, China government came with a new law just this summer. Beginning of January, there is not allowed anything on optical brightness as a chemical for food packaging. So making the board really white. So it needs to be OPA free. There is only Japan and Taiwan today in globe that has the same law. Now China, 1st of January, requests the same. So China is interesting because they do take decisions very rapidly. And your time frame, like compared to Europe, we talk about years and years implementing something, and we keep debating and debating. There was no debate. It's a decision. And in that sense, I do respect the Chinese way of, dealing. This is an issue, consumers request that, and this is one thing that our political or Politburo decides. So we need to understand. Then Americas, you see, like Jarkko said, San Francisco stated now they need to be plastic free. We know California, New York are looking from the plastic point of view, want to be as a prime movers in states. I'm not trying to say what is right or wrong. I'm just saying there is a lot of topics popping up much more than we've seen in the past 10 years.
But what California got wrong, the charge of paper bags also.
Yeah.
Which they shouldn't do. Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time with that. So thank you very much for your questions, and thank you very much for coming. Thanks, Johan.
Thank you.